Marcus Webb discovered the transaction while warming up leftover chili on a Tuesday night. $14,980. He stood frozen long enough that his stove burner clicked off automatically. The merchant label read Harrington Estate and Ballroom, vague enough to confuse a stranger, crystal clear to him. Sophie's reception venue. His first instinct, genuine and immediate, was identity theft. Then the memory surfaced like something held underwater finally breaking free. The walkthrough 4 months ago. Sophie had pressed his credit card into the venue coordinator's hand because her wallet was buried at the bottom of her oversized bag, and everyone had laughed when his expression flickered with hesitation. "That's Marcus for you," his mother had said warmly, squeezing his shoulder. He would never leave his little sister hanging. Standing alone in his apartment at 41 years old, Marcus understood something that moment had concealed. Nobody had asked him anything. They had simply decided. He called Sophie immediately. She answered distracted, already somewhere else entirely. He told her about the charge. A pause stretched between them. "Marcus, can we do this later? I'm confirming the florist contract. You charged the reception to my card." Another pause. "Then, it's temporary." "Sophie. Oh please, don't use that voice." Background noise shifted behind her. "You have a real income. Ryan and I are juggling literally a dozen vendors simultaneously. You never asked me. Because you would have said yes." That detail burned worse than anything else, because she meant it without guilt. By the time he arrived at his parents' house that evening, the conversation had already calcified into something ancient and exhausting. His father occupied the corner armchair in near silence while Sophie moved restlessly around the kitchen in expensive loungewear, wedding folders scattered across every surface like a battlefield aftermath. "You're turning a family favor into some dramatic crisis," she said. $15,000. My wedding." Their mother appeared instantly beside him. "Sweetheart, she's barely sleeping." Marcus turned toward her slowly. "Why does her exhaustion always become my financial obligation?" Nobody answered that directly. Instead came the rationalizations, layered and practiced. Sophie and Ryan were stretched beyond their limits. Wedding logistics were overwhelming. Families absorbed these things together. Marcus had no dependents. Marcus maintained stability. Marcus always recovered. The unsettling part was how none of it sounded malicious. Just automatic. Then Sophie crossed both arms and tilted her chin upward in that particular way she had whenever she believed the argument was already hers. "You're honestly pathetic," she said flatly. "No real family of your own, no one depending on you. You should absolutely cover it." The room went quiet in a way that felt heavy. Even their father shifted uncomfortably. Sophie registered the silence, then dismissed it immediately, rolling her eyes as though she'd only verbalized something universally understood. Marcus felt those words travel somewhere beneath ordinary hurt. Not because they were entirely accurate, but because he recognized what they revealed about how long he'd been invisible while being constantly useful. After their father's financial collapse years earlier, Marcus had quietly become the infrastructure. Extra shifts. Covered loans. Emergency transfers. Broken appliances replaced without discussion. He had dissolved so gradually into reliability that somewhere along the way, reliability had replaced identity entirely. Sophie continued filling the silence. "She's not completely wrong," their mother offered carefully. "You genuinely have fewer obligations than most people your age." Marcus studied all three of their faces for a long, unhurried moment. Then he nodded once, deliberately. "Pay attention to what happens next," he said, barely above a whisper. Sophie actually laughed out loud. The following morning, Marcus sat in his car outside his office building and contacted Harrington Estate directly. The event coordinator answered brightly until he explained his purpose. A pause followed while she reviewed the account. When she returned, her tone had shifted into something measured and professional. "Mr. Webb," she said carefully, "your credit card is currently designated as the active financial guarantor for the full reception package. I never formally agreed to permanent liability." Another pause. "Understood completely. If you withdraw authorization, what occurs?" The explanation arrived gently, almost sympathetically. "Without a confirmed guarantor or replacement deposit by end of business, the reception package would enter administrative suspension. Not the ceremony. Not the legal marriage itself. The reception." Marcus thanked her sincerely, composed a formal written request removing himself from all financial responsibility, and walked into his office. By noon, his phone showed 27 missed calls. By mid-afternoon, the number had climbed past 70. His mother left voicemails that dissolved into crying. Sophie cycled between volcanic anger and barely contained panic. Ryan called twice but left nothing recorded. The single voicemail Marcus replayed completely came from the venue coordinator herself. Measured, professional, procedural. "Mr. Webb, this confirms your removal request has been processed. Outstanding balance responsibility has been returned to the contracting parties pending payment resolution." That was when everything fundamentally shifted. Not emotionally. Structurally. For the first time, the family couldn't navigate toward him through guilt alone, because the situation had migrated beyond family vocabulary entirely. It now lived inside contracts, institutional deadlines, formal policy, documented financial responsibility. Something larger than sentiment had entered the conversation. That evening Ryan finally reached him personally. "I genuinely had no idea," he said immediately. They met at a coffee shop near the interstate. Ryan appeared hollowed out, jacket wrinkled, eyes carrying visible strain. "She told vendors you had stepped up voluntarily," he said quietly. I believed her completely. Marcus nearly laughed at how effortlessly credible that version sounded. Ryan pressed both palms against his face. "We can manage a portion. Not the full amount. Not immediately." "I'm not financing the reception," Marcus said simply. Ryan nodded slowly, carrying no defensiveness, only exhaustion. Sophie arrived 20 minutes later. The previous evening's confidence had completely evacuated her expression. She sat rigidly across from Marcus, mascara subtly compromised, jaw set against visible embarrassment. "You could have spoken to me privately before doing any of this." "I did speak to you." "That isn't the same thing and you know it." Marcus held her gaze steadily for a long, quiet moment. "Sophie," he said gently, "it genuinely is." No one raised their voices after that. Together they negotiated scaled adjustments with the venue. A reduced guest count. A simplified bar selection. More modest catering arrangements. Enough to preserve a real reception without drowning the couple in debt neither of them deserved to carry alone. The wedding arrived 3 days later. Genuinely beautiful. Sophie was radiant moving down the aisle. Their mother wept through the entire ceremony. Ryan looked less like a groom and more like a man who had narrowly survived something. During the reception, Sophie delivered brief remarks acknowledging family members individually. When she reached Marcus's name, something flickered across her expression, a fraction of a second, barely perceptible. But every person seated at the family table caught it. Marcus slipped out before the first dance began. Outside, autumn air moved cool against his jacket collar. Through the tall ballroom windows behind him, warm light moved across the dance floor, laughter rising and falling, glasses catching the glow. The family wasn't restored. It wasn't shattered either. But as Marcus walked unhurried across the quiet parking lot toward his car, something had unmistakably changed in the architecture of things. They finally understood that.